So we're in Matthew chapter 7, and it's the Sermon on the Mount. It's changing everything for a Jewish nation, making promises to those of us who are not born in a Jewish nation, and calling us to a standard that is absolutely insane. The standard may get you crucified. And he's telling you how not to go astray. In the Old Covenant, the children of Israel were formed as a nation and formed as a nation under God and called the children of Israel under a standard that they violated throughout the centuries, literally hundreds of times. I just gave someone an assignment yesterday to read the whole Old Testament from end to end without stopping. Just every day read. Don't study, don't journal, just read. And I told him, you're going to see the same thing said over and over. And again, Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. I mean, the miracles they saw. And see, today in our world, there really are miracles going on. They just don't change us. It isn't miracles that see us through. It really is faith. It really is a belief in the truth. And a belief in the truth will see you through with good results, which is next week, about good fruit and bad fruit. But this week, it's a different thing. It's one verse today. That's why sometimes it takes 16 years to get through 4 Gospels. It's because we do one verse on a Sunday. So, Matthew chapter 7, verse 15. Let's read it. Beware of the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Beware of the false prophets. I wonder what you think false prophets are. I wonder what we think being aware of them is. To beware of false prophets. What does that mean? What is it? How would that look if I were to beware of false prophets? How would you know I was? And if you were beware of false prophets, how would I know you are? So he goes on. He says, come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Did you know, like, we are called sheep? Referred to as sheep, whether we went astray or didn't go astray, we're referred to as sheep. We are told who the good shepherd is, and we're told that the sheep that belong to Jesus, Jesus says, my sheep know my voice and they follow me. Great story about shepherds of their day. Shepherds before there were electronic horns, whistles, things like that, when there was just a man and his sheep and the dog. And how they kept them, how they had a life. Like, these shepherds would come together in a field to have a campfire, and all their sheep would mix. And I'm thinking, you don't brand sheep, so how do you know your sheep? Yep. So they would create a call for their sheep, and they would teach their sheep from the time they were babies their call and their voice. And they would cry out. And they'd make some. I have tried on several occasions to imitate sheep calls, and it's just hideous, so I won't do it. But, one time, I'll tell you one mistake I made doing it that made me look really bad. I said, suey, suey, suey. Believe it or not, I actually did that. But the shepherd goes up and he makes his call. Now, 200 sheep on the side of a hill, and I'm leaving because I'm taking my sheep to that far hill, and we got to walk all day. So I call out, yada, 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 hey, you, hello. And I walk and they follow me. So anyone who knew sheepdom in those days, or sheep-like, or sheepfold, or whatever in those days, anyone knew about sheep, which was the currency of the day. The most common currency was sheep. So anyone who knew sheep knew when he talked about sheep, they knew what he was talking about. And when so he had 200 sheep, or let's say he had 50 and they're all his, and he knows them all. He probably named them all. Shepherds loved their sheep, and they knew their sheep, and they sheared their sheep, and they raised their sheep. And when they had to give one for sacrifice, it really, mostly shepherds were hired hands, though. When you read about David, he was a son tending the sheep, and that was a good thing to have, but not everybody who had sheep had sons that would tend sheep, so you had to have hired hands, and that was the stories about hired hands ditch. They leave the sheep unprotected. So when you have wolves amongst the sheep, which also was common, they commonly knew that. Wow. The goal of, like you read it in David's writings, you read it all the way back in anything to do with sheep, it was watching for the sheep. What David said about the sheep was, when I was a shepherd boy and I watched my father's sheep, and the lion, the bear, or the wolf came after them, did I not rise up and smote them unto death? Whoa. He was a boy watching his father's sheep. He said, did I not smote them unto death? He had a cane, and that cane was not for, little Bo Peep. It was for the shepherd of the sheep, to protect the sheep from danger. And so anyone who was involved in sheep knew that the danger was the predators of the world. Here I am called, in the New Covenant it really calls the shepherd of the sheep. The pastor is the shepherd of the sheep. In fact, the word pastor means the shepherd of the sheep. And so I am not very well versed in sheep. I have never taken care of a sheep in my life until I got called to be a pastor. And the reason I didn't want to be a pastor of anything was because people make really lousy sheep. Everybody knows this. If the head sheep goes off a cliff, all the sheep go off the cliff. They follow a leader sheep. You make a lead sheep, and they all follow him. If he goes out and drowns, they all drown. The story of the pigs in the Gadarene demoniac, the story of the pigs is really weird, because pigs don't do that. One pig does something wrong, and they all back off from him. They leave him. Wow. In a sheep pen, or a pig pen, when you pick one to slaughter, you point at it, they all desert him. And he sits there going, freak out. Because they run, because they never follow each other. And pastoring people is way more like pastoring pigs than shepherding sheep. So God says to me 20 years ago on July 1st, or actually it was August 9th, 10th, 31 and 9 is 40. We're going out to walk the streets of Oroville on the 20th anniversary of a fast and prayer we did, that on the 41st day, God told me to do the Father's house. Right. And I said, well, Lord, I thought we had a deal. I didn't have to pastor a church. I thought I could just be a youth pastor, and I thought that I could just be a businessman. I thought my ministry could be using money to promote your kingdom. And he said, do this. And I said, okay. But you do realize I'm not that great a shepherd. I know nothing about sheep, and they are like cats or pigs. So I don't know what to do. So here we are 20 years later, coming up on 20 years. Not from the day the church started, but the day he told me to start the church. So I founded a church. Didn't even know how, and I did it. And so, beware of false prophets who dress up like sheep. Just think about that. They dress up like sheep. If you're going to pastor sheep, the predators look like sheep. What do? Just go to sleep and let God handle it? That makes them pretty well-fed wolves, because people don't listen to what he said. And what he said here, we would need way less shepherding if people would just do what he said today. And here's what he said: beware of the false prophets who come to you as wolves who look like sheep, dressed up as sheep. Every bad thing I experienced, the loss of my dreams, the hate for people, was the shepherds, false prophets that dressed up like sheep. I was in a church that read the gospel every week. I was in a church that had Jesus in front of me every week. And when I found out these guys weren't really like sheep, they were wolves, I know I was devoured. I ran away. So let's just talk about the word beware. What could have helped me? Next week we're going to talk about the fruit, and no good fruit, bad fruit, and all that. So we'll refer back to this, so hopefully you're here for both. This word beware, what would you think it meant? Watch out. But here's what it really means. It means watch from safety. Is that guy safe? I'm not getting near him until he is safe. What should I do if I think he's a sheep in wolf's clothing? I should look like sheep don't have paws. Is that a fang I see? Smile at me. Wait till we see him smile. If he has fangs, he's not a sheep. Stay away. Don't run up to him. Don't just listen to anything he says because it sounds good. You know, he goes on a lot about people talking and saying things that tickle your ear. The apostles talk about it incessantly because immediately after Jesus left the earth, the church was attacked by a thing called Gnosticism that said that everything you do is okay because you're redeemed, and so your redeemed body is doing it. Doesn't affect your spirit. Completely destroyed the church, and we don't have any of that going on today, do we? So the first thing is beware. From a distance, be safe. Don't just run after anybody, listening to anybody. You know, there's all the time I hear sermons on the radio, and people say, that guy's so good. And I'm like, I don't know that guy. I need to stay back and not let him influence me. Let's define prophet for a minute. Do you know what a prophet is? Beware of false prophets. Well, before I know what false is, I should probably know what true is. What's the definition of this thing? What is the false prophecy that I need to beware of? Good. Well, a prophet, the word prophecy is telling the future. A prophet is someone who tells you something that affects your future. If he is God's prophet, then he is telling you something from God that affects your future. When I talked about fathers, I'm telling you, I will try with all my heart to tell you only things that affect your future well. And if you've made decisions that don't affect your future well, I'm going to tell you that would be a mistake. And then I am a prophet. It's up to you to determine, am I a true prophet or a false prophet? And he's telling you to beware of people who tell you about the future or tell you to do things that will affect your future, good or bad. Find out before you listen. So I welcome the Father's House Church. Examine my life. Do what I say in small measure until it proves well to you. Then add it. But eventually, you have to listen to prophets. You have to look out for false prophets, and you have to do it from a distance, from safety. Because if you rush in, they may look like sheep, but they may be wolves. Good. What are some of these false prophecies and some of these wolves? What are these wolves? What are these things they're teaching us? I think a lot of you have been hurt so bad by fathers, or hurt so bad by authority, hurt so bad by a system that didn't work, that the worst false prophet you have is you won't listen to anybody. You won't be taught by anybody. You can't follow anybody. And here's the big, you can't trust anybody. Right. Is the biggest one. Because they get to determine they get to determine the future. So therefore, because their bad behavior makes it so in the future you can't have anything good because you can't listen and follow anybody good, then they are still the false prophets that are destroying your future. Good. That's good. Can't shake it free. Good. Recently spoke in a group of pastors. Me and Jordy actually shared that one. And we spoke in a group of pastors. And in the room was full of people who were previously disciples for Christ or shepherding movement. Well, I can tell you they were a shepherding movement, and when I was involved or when I was walking alongside with shepherding movement people, it was good, and it went all bad. And we're 40 years later. People absolutely can't listen to anybody because those people did it wrong. Therefore, those false prophets have affected 40 years in their life because following, leading, listening, mentoring, accountability, the whole fathering thing, man to man, man to woman, people to people, the whole leadership principle is destroyed by guys 40 years ago who did horrible things with leadership. So false prophets hurt and destroyed people, making true prophets unable to reach the people because false prophets still control the future.
Good. Yeah.
40 years ago, do you know the divorce rate amongst Christians was a fraction of the divorce rate amongst non-Christians? You know what's happened in 40 years? It's even. Easier to quit than get in and fight it. Quitting is better than submission. 40 years ago, you know how many kids quit my Little League team? I don't remember anyone ever quitting. I remember a guy got mononucleosis and couldn't finish the season. That's it.
Right.
I played Little League year-round.
Right.
All my life. You know how many people quit in a Little League now? Christian parents saying, just let them quit. It's like we've just been seduced to absolute ruin because nobody can listen to true prophets because false prophets were so bad. It was so hard for the Lord to get me to join a church because the leaders of my church were such wolves. They weren't anything like Jesus. They were bad. Therefore, I would not... I actually said to the Lord when I came to him and found out he was real, oh no, you're real. Okay, let's go. Can you help me? Because I've completely decided you weren't real because they weren't real. Now I find out you are real. What am I going to do? And eventually I said, I would love to follow you, but it would really be good if it didn't involve a church. Because I did that my whole life, and that was bad. And so I ended up in a home group for a while, and then all of a sudden he led me to church. I thought we had an agreement. I didn't have to do church. I thought, you're the boss. Here I come. I'm with you. Beware of false prophets because wolves in sheep clothing. I better learn how to recognize what a real sheep is. I better read Jesus. You remember this story of Jesus taking 3 guys up a hill. They wanted to make an altar to these guys. They showed Moses and Elijah show up and they said, "That's so good. We can make you equal to them." And the Father speaks out of the cloud and says, "This is my son. Listen to him." Right. You want to know what a sheep should be? Listen to him. You want to know what church should look like? Listen to him. You want to learn who you should follow, who you should listen to? Do they look like him?
Good.
Or are you completely divorced from that? Like, I can't listen to nobody because so-and-so back in the day was not trustworthy. I got devoured by wolves before, and I thought they were good. Okay. Man, I know how hard that is. I'm telling you my stories because I know how hard it is to be unified with human beings. Human beings are way more like pigs than sheep. I already said all that. It's hard to join them. But I'm telling you that Paul the Apostle, the Stanford graduate of Jesus, the law and the prophets master, PhD, studied under Gamaliel, Pharisee of Pharisees, became a Christian and said, it's kind of like this. Like the body, like the human body. We are one body. The eye cannot say to the ear, I have no need of you. If you have been going to church in your life and part of a good body and you stop, you have been like the eye that says to the ear, I don't need this body, let's get out of here. Right. Well, take my eye out and put it on the sidewalk and see how good that eye does without me.
Right.
See how good the body is without the eye. That's what Paul the Apostle, the Master, said. Look at it this way. And all of us say, what's Paul know? He lived in a different century. What's he know? He doesn't know how unfaithful these people are. Well, the one day they were saying, "Feed me, Jesus." Next day they were screaming, "Crucify him." What? They weren't as bad in those days? What they wanted was nails driven in his flesh and whips to be applied to his back. And they weren't as bad as we are today? That's what they wanted because he made them look bad. In the temple, he made them look bad. He taught and made their teaching sound foolish. He threw their tables over and called them thieves. So they wanted nails driven in his hands. They wanted him to die slow, horribly. They're not as bad as the people we've known today. They're pretty bad. And Jesus says, beware of them. And it's not just be on the lookout. It's from a distance, from a safe place. The very word in Hebrew means from a safe place. Look for false prophets. Be safe and stay away from false prophets. People who tell you, you need to make money. You need to take care of yourself. You need to watch out for your future. You need to worry about your inheritance. You need to worry about what you leave your children. It's okay you have this faith, but there's also life. You have to look out for this stuff and say, you can't pervert me with that. You can do this on your own. You don't need church. You're about to be lunch, breakfast, or dinner for something with fangs. Dead serious. Join a church. Find shepherds. Get committed. Work on your marriage. Work on being a father to your own children. And if you can't, then to other children. Be a man that others can walk with. Be a woman that others can stand with. Be a person that believes. And the number one thing written on your sleeve is not, woe is me, or poor, poor, pitiful me, but I follow Jesus. I am a sheep of his flock. I know his voice and I follow him. What he says, as the Father said, listen to him, I listen to him. Right. And I look for men who listen to him. And I look for leaders who teach me what he says and explain what he says. But this isn't where I'm from. This is Oroville. Well, geography means nothing. They're not, but my family. Well, who is my family? Jesus made that real clear. Whoever does what I tell them to do, that's my mother, my brother, my sisters. Good. Are you with me? So, there's a story. There's a story that this guy told. He had been in town, and he was a pastor in this town, a small town, and this town was known for being a slaughterhouse. And this is where all the farmers and all of the livestock were brought, slaughtered, processed, and huh? It's a slaughterhouse for livestock. And this guy his wife would drag him to church, and the pastor for 20 years, every time he'd see his face in church, would give an altar call. Talk about the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world and led like a lamb to the slaughter and all those things. And this man hated going to church and hated the messages of the gospel. And then one day he walks in the pastor's office crying. I have to give my life to Jesus. He said, what's happened? You hate this church. I can tell. I irritate you every time I open my mouth. What are you doing here today? Gave his life to the Lord. He says, I have to tell you. Today they changed the charter. I'm going to work angry for 20 years. And every day it's pigs. And every day I hate it. They scream and they jump and they run and they fight. And every day I got to deal with this slaughterhouse. And today, when I'm waiting for the doors to open, I'm listening for the squeal of pigs. And all of a sudden I hear the bleating of lambs. And all I could think about was every time you talk about the lamb led to the slaughter. And they open the door and the lambs come in quietly, bleeding, but just come in following the orders. He goes, and I took the first lamb and he didn't fight me, and I'm used to having to wrestle pigs. And he goes, the lamb just sat there, and when I When I did my job, he bled on me, and instead of jumping and freaking out, he leaned into me. He looked up at me, and he did not judge me. But he looked, and then he looked down at my hand, and he licked his own blood off my hand as he passed away. I only got to do one today. I knew I had to come see you, Pastor. I understood for the first time lamb led to the slaughter, and that I was called to be a sheep in your kingdom. And I understood that lambs give their life. You want to know if you're following a sheep? You want to, from a distance, see if you're talking about somebody shepherding right or shepherding wrong. Is it safe or isn't it? First and foremost, ask yourself, where is he giving his life away? Wolves don't give their life away. They're the most cunning animals in the forest. Did you know that if wolves watch the sheep move in this direction, eating the grass, tomorrow they go out and hide in the grass in front of where the sheep go? They figure it out. Wolves eat sheep. Wolves devour sheep. You want to know from safety what a false prophet is? Where do they give their life away? False prophets usually don't lay down their life for the sheep. Ask yourself, where are you giving your life away? Where do you give your life away? The man described to his pastor that these sheep just lined up to be slaughtered. They didn't fight. They didn't run. And as the men continued to slaughter, I did one, and I had to drop my knife and walk out and say, never again will I return to that job. Lambs give their life. Beware of false prophets. They're like sheep, wolves in sheep's clothing. You can dress up like a sheep all you want. You can learn the language and say praise the Lord and hallelujah, and you can dance and jump. And let me just tell you, are you giving your life to your wife? Are you giving your life to your husband? Are you giving your life for your children? Are you giving your life for strangers? Where are you giving your life away? I'm often asked about people who've lost their children, been separated. It's like, well, why don't you start loving them? What's that look like? Because nobody knows. I know. I know what that looks like. Being a shepherd is the most important job in my life. Being the shepherd of my own children, the most important job in my life. Being a shepherd to not let my wife go astray, to not lead her astray, to not walk with her and say, this is good when it's not good. Are you laying your life down for your spouse? Are you laying your life down for your children? Children, are you laying your life down for your parents? Laying your life down for your neighbor? Are you full of anger and vitriol? Are you, when he described the sheep just leaning into him, looking at him, there was no judgment. It's the nature of sheep. Are you a sheep? I'll bet you sheep know what sheep look like. I bet you sheep know what to expect in the nature of sheep. So you have to, when you read Jesus, you have to always ask yourself, how do I compare? I remember a lady told me she doesn't make her kids go to church because she was made to go to church. I said, yeah, but you're 40 years old and you're still loving Jesus, attending church. So it actually worked. Why did you stop doing what worked? Why did you take away from your children the responsibility to be part of a body? Didn't you explain to them the true nature of going to church? It has a purpose. It has a reason. The unification of people, laying down our life for each other. The body, the eye saying to the ear, I have no need of you. Why would you go teach your children not to go to church instead of teaching your children to go to church?
Right.
Let them complain.
That's right.
Just continue to live in front of them correctly. Take it as personal responsibility. I'm going to demonstrate truth to you. Not through anger, but just I'm going to be right. I'm going to do right. Why do we go to church? Because it's right.
That's right.
It's right to do so. Why do we serve all the time? Because it's right to do so. Why? You said you can't afford to buy me a bike, but you put so much money in the offering. Why? Because it's right to do so. And it's good that you sacrificed your bicycle so that I could put money in the offering and be part of what that church does. Here at the Father's House, I mean, we do an amazing amount of things. And everybody who contributed in that offering got to say, I'm part of that.
That's right.
You can look at your children and say, it was right to do that. It's the least we could do for what he did for us. Can I just say something to you about me, and you can decide whether it's about you, and you can count on this. If you want to follow me, you can count on this. I am owed nothing. You owe me nothing. He owes me nothing. I deserve nothing from you or from him. I owe everything to him. And he says, whatever I owe him, give it to you. So therefore, I consider that I owe you everything. I work for Jesus, and that's just crazy. I was in a church one time, and they desperately needed a nursery call system, so I installed it, crawling through attics and holes and crazy things when I was young. I could do that kind of stuff. Nursery call system. So you didn't have to come in and say, hey, your kids are messing up. You just say, put the number up there, and the people quietly go to the nursery. Come out demanding to pay me. I was shocked. I can't be paid. I was already paid. Paid in full.
That's right.
Holy moly. I thought you said this was Jesus' church. It is. Well, I can't do a job for Jesus' church and then ask for money for it. I didn't know this was your church. If it's your church, let me get the bill. But if it's his church, I'm not giving no bill. I'm owed nothing. I already owe everything to him. I would put nursery call systems in every day for him. There's nothing you can ask of me that I wouldn't do for him. And for them. I remember I got a little bummed out every time someone asked us for dinner. Can I talk to you for a minute? This door kind of sticking here. I'm like, oh man. I got bummed out for a minute before because I forgot. I'm owed nothing.
Right.
To do this door for him is to do it for him. I lost track of that. And see how fast false prophets get us thinking? Did he offer to pay you? Didn't it cost you gas to get over here? And I'm like, well, I don't know how other people see it. I don't know how you're going to see it. You have to decide this. Me, I work for him. Everything I do for you, I do for him because he says to do it for you he counts it as doing it for him.
Right.
I have to look at my heart and say, I want that to be true. If I were to do something for you and you give me $10, I really discounted my work. I'm telling you, $10 instead of love for him. I'd much rather do it as love for him. You get the benefit, that's okay with me. I did it for you, and I didn't do it for you. If you can hang with me on that, can you? Are you feeling challenged at all this morning? Seduction right now out there in this mucky world. I probably have 5 former staff members that are just headed to pure hell. The misery they're about to see in their life, they're already seeing it. And I'm just like, who got to you? Who got to you? Who seduced you away? Come on. Come on. I know it wasn't, hey, you're there. I need you over here by tomorrow. It was, you're there, and I need you to move a little. Come on. Come on. Just a little. Just a little. That's all it is. I see it all the time. It's like, stop. Stop. And I just can't get them to stop. And then it's hell. And then it's pure hell. Then it's just like, oh, gosh. I love you so much. Jesus. I know how, if I loved him, I can't imagine how much more you loved him. If it hurt me, I can't imagine how much it hurt you. Yeah. What we've really come to realize, even recently, is how many people are not converted. They're just convinced. That's right. This is the truth. Oh, I accept the truth. But they haven't done what Jesus said and allowed the Holy Spirit to completely change them. I've always used the term brightly converted, and then there's this other term, crossed over into born-again nature. I once was, and now I am. I know me. I was a liar and a thief. I was angry at everything and hated church and hated Christians. It didn't take long for me to love Christians and love church and love kingdom and never lie and would never steal. What happened? What happened? I didn't go back to being a baby. I was born again. I was converted, transformed. At one time, everybody owed me everything. Nobody gave me nothing. I never got what I deserved. And now, I still don't get what I deserve. I get so much more than I deserve. I get awesome. My life is awesome. Best it's ever been. You know, I always notice on the film that I'm using my hands all the time. It drives me crazy. Sorry. My life's the best it's ever been. I love my life. I love Jesus. I want to be the good shepherd. I want to make sure false prophets, wolves in sheep's clothing, don't devour the sheep. So come with me. Be born again. Be transformed into a new creature. If you're convinced, say, good, I'm convinced. But come be conformed, transformed, converted. Thank you. Come be converted.